Welcome to the Seeds of Revolution, a new podcast created by Camas Books and Info Shop. Camas is a non-profit anarchist collective in Victoria, British Columbia, on unceded Lekwungen territory, which is home to the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples. Camas was founded in 2007 to support the decolonization struggles of Indigenous peoples in the region known as British Columbia and beyond. Today, our collective operates a book and info shop at 2620 Quadra Street in Victoria, BC. Our shop is open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. We host community art and education events and actively support anti-fascist and anti-capitalist liberation projects locally and around the world. Camas created the Seeds of Revolution in order to, as Angela Davis put it, grasp things by the root. The Seeds of Revolution will feature discussions about anarchist ideas in books, and we will also seek to clarify the why. Traditional and for-profit media are quick to talk about what is happening, especially as it relates to elections, profits, and the comings and goings of people in power. But they are far slower and more hesitant to discuss the why. Why climate change affects marginalized people most quickly and catastrophically. Why land acknowledgements and reconciliation committees have not dented the dramatic overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in Canadian prisons. Why the murderers of 30,000 Gazans and counting will never see the inside of a courtroom. The Seeds of Revolution will focus on the root of problems confronting the people of Vancouver Island and around the world, and advocate for solutions to those problems, fixed in an anti-capitalist, anarchist framework. We will also feature stories about painting, dance, literature, and books, because art, by its very inherent nature, liberates the spirit from oppression. In this first episode, we would like to introduce some of the members of the Camas Collective and hear what brought them to Camas, to anarchism, and what gives them hope for the future. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the Seeds of Revolution.
Hi, and welcome to the Camas podcast. My name's Rob. I'm a member of the Camas Books and Info Shop Collective, and I'm here on a lovely Saturday afternoon with other members of the Camas Books and Info Shop Collective. Camas is located at 2620 Quadra Street in Quadra Village in so-called Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And so today we're going to talk about anarchism and what it means and what it looks like and other components about it with members of the collective. First off, I'm going to ask Will to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what anarchism as a concept means to you and what does it look like in practice.
Thanks, Rob. My name's Will, he, him pronouns. For me, anarchism is a politic of egalitarian self-governance, participatory community decision-making, autonomy, mutual aid, voluntary association, and solidarity. A lot of the times when we think about anarchism, we think about the negative definitions, what anarchism isn't, like it's anti-capitalist, anti-racist, anti-state. But the positive principles of anarchism are really important for developing an anarchist politics as well. And I think there's no universal form of anarchist practices in the way that anarchist institutions, organizations, or society will be lived, because the needs, histories, and considerations of each community are situated in time and place very differently. There are guiding principles to the politic, but no schematics that have to be followed.
All right, thank you, Will. Alan.
Thanks, Will. Alan, he, him, I've been involved in Camas Books since its beginning. Really, I'm one of the co-founders. When I think of anarchism, I think very much along the lines that Will just outlined in terms of the necessary diversity in forming the enactment of anarchism in your everyday life and also in society at large. Reconstituting social relations around anti-authoritarian, horizontal values, values that encourage self-empowerment and self-realization, both individually and collectively. Those are foundational to anarchism. I should also say that anarchism expands beyond human relationships to relationships with other species and the ecology as a whole. And so that's also another component of reconstituting society along anarchist lines.
Thanks, Alan. Kimberly.
Hi, my name is Kimberly, she, her pronouns. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm very grateful to be among friends. For me, anarchism as a concept happens when we are, each and every one of us, ungoverning and ungovernable. It's a life force that moves through the relationships that we share with each other through the practices of respect, reciprocity, and empowerment. And it's what we do with power with relationships as opposed to power over. And I'm taking this from the witch and activist, anarchist, Starhawk, who is a wonderful writer, and I highly recommend her work.
Thanks, Kim. Chris?
Well, of course, everything that has been said, I can agree with. I think to boil it down, to me, anarchism is about freedom for everybody, for every single person, which means in all forms of oppression, all people, regardless of who they are and where they are, deserve to be free and be treated as equals, equally deserving of respect. And I would say that's basically what it means. You can put it into practice with the people around you.
Thanks, Chris. Soraya.
Hi, I'm Soraya, she, her pronouns. I also agree with everyone else's answers. For me, I want to stress the importance of consistency. Anarchism in practice for me means being consistent in what we say and what we do. So for me, it's very important not to fall under that left unity bullshit that panders to political party agendas. And I think if you're making space for reactionaries under the guise of anti-imperialism or anti-colonialism, then it's not really anarchism anymore. It's being useful idiots for someone else.
Thanks, Soraya. Oh.
Thank you, Soraya. My name is Nathan Moss. She, him pronoun. I've been a part of Camas for 3 years now, and for me, I am also in agreement with everyone else here on the concept of anarchism. I think for me, anarchism gives everybody a chance to be equal in community and in individuality, and also allows for everybody to step up and be their own leader through the group itself. Everybody has the skills and the abilities, and anarchism allows each person in community to go and learn the skills or build on top of what they don't know and add that to the individual thought process and to the community itself. So when everybody is lateral and equal, then that gives people the autonomy to contribute to the community in however they feel comfortable or enabled.
All right. Thank you, Nate. Great. Yeah. And thanks, everyone. Next thing I wanted to ask you all was what first brought you to anarchism? And what, in particular, I suppose, what writings or works of art most influenced you in taking it seriously as an approach to the world and perhaps even to changing the world? We'll start with you, Will. Oh, okay. So we'll start with you, Alan.
Okay. I was drawn by the creative energy of the movement. When I was in my early 20s, I started visiting an anarchist bookstore in Montreal. And there I encountered journals, books, zines, posters produced in Canada, the UK, France, Germany, and other countries. So I began reading anarchist journals, particularly some journals that were published in Toronto and also Vancouver. And through those journals, I learned about these vibrant anarchist communities that were really, engaged in all sorts of activism. What most impressed me actually was that anarchists combine critical thinking with action. So I was introduced to anarchism as a expansive movement engaged with ecological defense, indigenous solidarity activism, and other initiatives. When I turned around and looked at leftist politics, it looked pretty stupid compared to anarchism. And the second question, Rob, was
works of art or what writings so about which thinkers, writers.
Yeah, that's
artists.
that's a tricky question for me because I've written quite extensively about anarchist cultural production and how it figures in the movement from the 19th century to the present. I published a book tracking how modern art was radicalized by anarchists in the early 20th century, and that involved artists and cultural activists from India, Britain, France, Russia, and elsewhere, who converged in the United States during World War I and developed discourses and art practices that linked up art production to radical social transformation in a very meaningful way. And then in the course of World War I, a number of those artists actually went over to Russia and participated in the Russian Revolution and witnessed its repression by the communists and so forth. So there's a myriad of artists and cultural thinkers that really impressed me from that period. But getting more to the present, I'm completing a book right now on anarchist currents in contemporary art, and I discuss the work of various artists who I'm inspired by. These include Gord Hill, who's Kwakwaka'wakw, a graphic artist, someone who's really done tremendous work in communicating the radical politics of resistance politics, Antifa, and other kinds of resistance politics. Frida Gutmann, who's a Montreal-based anarchist artist, who's Jewish and who's done a lot of solidarity work in Palestine. And her art is critically self-reflexive vis-a-vis her positioning of herself as Jewish and her responsibility of solidarity and militant support for Palestinian liberation. A third artist that I'm impressed by is Fly, who's a squatter based in New York, who does graphic work that's all about her community. And another artist that inspires me is Rocky Dobie, who's based in Toronto, who does public art that's all about public memory and creating kind of squatting the streets, basically, through his art, which is unsanctioned and speaks to radical political values. So those are a few of the artists that have inspired me.
Great. Thanks so much, Alan. Yeah, that's an interesting list. Anyone else? Kim?
Sure, I can speak to that. It's a funny story. At first, I was a feminist at age 13, and that was an interesting time in my life because I was told, shh, don't tell anyone you're a feminist. They might think you're a lesbian. But then I met someone who opened the door and I fell in love, and he said, I'm an anarchist. And I came to anarchism through love. And over the next 10 years, I discovered more about anarchism through books and reading. And I would consider what I would call myself someone with anarchist tendencies. But in my late 20s, I found another love who opened up the anarchist activist lifestyle for me, and the love of my life, who's with me now for the past 20 years. We embarked together on a life-love relationship with anarchism, and because I have this love, I am on for anarchism all the time. And anarchism is my mission.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, Chris, what writings or art inspire you or brought you to anarchism?
Well, I would say Facebook was the first thing before writing and art. I would say I got it from Facebook. that's where I was first exposed to so many of the ideas that now are just second nature to me. There were just so many people there that I would argue with and who took the time to explain, why I was wrong and about all these different issues. And, more issues kept coming up. Like at first, you don't learn about, say, feminism or decolonization or something, but then you realize, no, it's all part of it because they're all, these are all like oppressive forces that, well, not, no, I mean, that there are all these oppressive forces that these, great ideas seek to eliminate, right? and then when you learn about anarchism, you realize that it's all those things. It's fighting against all oppression, all those different forces, So it's also all the different things combined. It's also it's like it's got feminism in it. It's got decolonization in it because all of those things are fighting against different forms of oppression. I wouldn't say there's any one or few writings that have really influenced me because I've read like so much, and each one just, you learn a little bit more. I could certainly recommend some introductions to anarchism, but they're all kind of similar. So, Kropotkin, Malatesta, for example, those are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody, they're pretty accessible to anybody, I'd say.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Soraya, what brought you to anarchism and what writings or art inspired you?
I mean, my reasons can stretch as far back as my ancestors and grandparents who resisted, imperialist invaders from the British to the Soviets in Afghanistan. But it was really during my involvement in the anti-war movement against the US and NATO-led occupation that I saw who was the most honest and principled ally. I organized primarily with my own community. And so the first anarchists I met and were exposed to were actually other Afghans. I initially looked to them for guidance and learning and adopting more radical values. But we also networked with other anti-war groups and movements across North America. And I would say the non-Afghan leftists were happy to work with us until our actions got progressively more disruptive. When we expressed righteous anger, when we started participating in more direct actions, essentially when the shit hit the fan, the only people who stood by us were other radical BIPOC communities, the anti-war veterans, and anarchists. And of course, these groups are not mutually exclusive because there's a lot of overlap between them. But they didn't harbor any of that respectability politics or selective outrage that I found so limiting. So for me, that was a big test of integrity. It convinced me that anarchists are the political activists who not only shared my values, but were people I can trust.
Great. Thank you for that perspective. Nate?
Thank you, Soraya. My journey into anarchism really started around 9/11. I remember that day like it was yesterday. And soon after, I became aware of imperialism and the catastrophic effect it has had around the globe. And so that really led me to an international perspective of what capitalism really meant to, never mind us on Turtle Island, but the others as well. So I started off as an anti-imperialist, and then I would say that, then I found, I entered indigenous studies at the Molten College, and I got a chance to be included in the indigenous communities here on the Swanman territory, along with other visitors who partook in the program, and they really introduced to me the drastic effect of colonialism has on not only indigenous people but all of us. And so soon after that, I around that time, I joined the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair, and then soon after, I joined the Camas Collective. And so for me, it was a gradual gradual progression life. I started out as an NDP Vanguard Chartline member, and then I went further and further left, and that's how I ended up here. But people that really influenced me along the way were Noam Chomsky, Kimberly Sidewell, Alan Atliff, Cord Help, David Draper, throughout, quite a few. And along the way, I became in touch with anarchism. I came in touch with my Jewish self and my identity as a Jewish anarchist. And for me, that completes me as a person. Tying together all the aspects of my heritage and my contemporary position in the time. And so anarchism is also the only place where I've ever felt really equal amongst able-bodied peers. So there's that too. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm happy to be here.
Great, thanks so much, Nate, and everyone. Yeah, I think that's it just even hints at the breadth and diversity and the depth of principles and the internationalism that anarchism embodies and encompasses. Yeah. So the next question, I think we started to hint at the answer, but yeah, it is why do each of you think anarchism is the best model for liberation? Who would like to go first? Well,
we've seen what happens when new groups of elites seize the state and use its structure of domination to impose their vision of the world. So in response to that, I think anarchism is a process of practicing liberatory and emancipatory life ways and building a new world together that doesn't involve imposing and dominating others.
Thanks, Will. Anyone else? Why you think anarchism is the best model for liberation?
I'm not sure if this is an explicitly anarchist idea, but something that I really have been engaging with. The idea of prefigurative politics / concrete utopia, which is something that came to me via the writer Uri Gordon, who we invited to speak for the No State Solution early last January. And Uri has been grappling with the prefigurative politics and concrete utopia idea, and so I'm kind of learning from him right now about this. The idea of the means of which we create social change must match the ends to which we want to create that change. So the means to create the change must match the ends. And so that things that do happen will happen non-coercively. And that is an important concept for anarchism. And I think that's one of the ways that we as anarchists have enacted a social consciousness that is different from other forms of revolutionary guards, because we don't want to impose a vanguard vision on a forward thinking for the future, but we want to have the future percolate from below, where everyone works together to decide what's going to happen as a group, as a community, and as a society. And so I think that's an important element to anarchism that I think we should remember. But the idea with means and ends is we don't want the means to become the ends. We want to have at least some sort of progress. We don't want it to become circular. We want to have some sort of sense of progress so that there is a goal at the end. And that's where we are concretely making things happen in the present moment. And that's something that we do constructively. Like there's different forms of direct action. There's the direct action that stops things from happening, like stop blockades or stops negative things from happening. But then there's the direct action that we are doing here at Camas, which is the positive, constructive direct action, that we are doing things for ourselves to make things happen. And this is how we do it freely. And that is an anarchist project in our activities. And that's how we enact anarchism together.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kim. Yeah, I think, that's a pretty clear and accessible explanation and definition of prefigurative politics, and the concept of making the world that we want to see in like through our actions, and doing it kind of now in the moment and every moment. Yeah, no, that's a great model. Yes, Soraya, models for liberation.
Because I value the truth. In struggles for power, you'd be surprised at how quickly the truth becomes inconvenient and twisted and warped to suit self-interest goals. I think anyone who feels the need to systemically coerce, lie, and oppress entire communities for their side to win should not be the deciders of anyone's fate.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Joanna, and for that. And for me, I follow Kim's example. I think a lot of radical movement, including anarchist, are like, well, let uprise, overthrow, produce the revolution. And I think we have to be very careful not to reproduce what revolutionaries have resulted in templatically before, which is ultimately some form of reproduction of hierarchical authoritative power. So to me, I think that conflict utopia and free vegetative thinking is a way to constantly game plan, if you will, while we're actively pursuing that revolution. And so I think that, pre-vegetative thinking happens for me on an everyday basis. It's picking up litter off the ground. It's deciding to walk instead of take my van. It's contributing more of my what financial means to have towards groups that are embodying those things that we all believe in. And so for me, what I also feel really encouraged about is how anarchism has progressed so far over the years. As a movement, we started out with white European people, and we've expanded to now there's black anarchism, there's indigenous anarchism, and so as a whole, anarchism allows people to find their own versions of anarchism as they grow and transform and decolonize out of what they were into what they want to be. And I think that for me, that's what's so inviting about anarchism and why I feel so hopeful is because preventatively we want to have a balanced relationship with nature, and we want to have a reciprocal relationship with communities and the land itself, while also addressing colonization, capitalism, Zionism, among many other things. So that for me gives me hope around that concrete utopia preventative thinking that Kimberly was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, thank you, Nate. And I think we're segueing well to the next question, which, in regards to liberation and thinking, both locally and globally. Just curious about what any of you might think is some of the biggest challenges people face when trying to organize their communities around anarchist or decolonial, anti-capitalist principles, to push either to just self-organize or to push their nation states or jurisdictions to be anti-capitalist and to forward anti-imperialism. Alan.
Yeah, I was pondering this question and I thought, well, where can I look for a example of effective organizing to realize these challenges? And the first place I thought of was the autonomous administration of North and East Syria, known as Rojava, and how those folks have been engaged in counter-authoritarian or non-authoritarian, I should say, self-governing federation movement building, striving to defend and expand their program, which is economic, social, in a territorial fashion. So drawing people in that region into their project as an organic evolution of self-liberation. And their idea is to dissolve state hierarchies from within, I'd say, by building parallel infrastructures of self-governance that grow and prove themselves to be much better and more fulfilling for the people who are engaged in them than the state model. In the case of Syria, of course, we have a horrible authoritarian state model that's not only done violence against the various peoples within the governing apparatus known as Syria, but also done tremendous violence against the environment in that region too. So this reminds me that evolution and revolution are interrelated. Anarchism is a politics that can incorporate peaceful evolution towards revolution, towards a revolutionary and total social change. So the challenge is to organize effectively so you can overcome militarized state violence. That's first and foremost the challenge that those folks are facing when it's directed their way. So in keeping with the means-ends congruence and so forth, the way in which they organize even their armed resistance against authoritarian violence is anarchistic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, anyone else? So about the challenges in organizing. Well,
if no one has. Okay. One of the things, I don't remember who said this first, so this is not original. This is something that I've heard, that it's so much easier for people these days to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
Yeah, it's been attributed to, I think, both Frederick Jameson or Mark Fisher.
Mark Fisher.
Zizek.
Yeah, so like this is something that has been going around. Like it's like, and I was thinking about that as a concept, and I think it really comes along the lines because we have such a really strong Christian like a Christian background into our Western model of society,
Mm-hmm.
so that this worldview and the presence within society is all about the end times is more prevalent in the way we think as opposed to actually building something that could replace it. And I really think that we are trained to be learned as a sort of a learned helplessness to not create a community, but to be isolated and individualized, even in our social infrastructure. So the playthings that is created in society, like Facebook or Instagram, these playthings that are produced are designed to create individualism, mm-hmm. as opposed to collective models of engagement and interactions. And so people are being entrained to learn do things a certain way and to not get together and to overthrow capitalism. And those are just a few of my thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's go to Chris.
I was just going to expand on what Kimberly was saying because I study propaganda and indoctrination and that kind of thing. And I think, and that's always my answer for this kind of question. Why aren't more people doing more, against everything from climate change to white supremacy? All of these things are getting worse. Why aren't people doing more? And I think everything you just said, I agree with, but it's so much more than that. It's everything we're taught right from birth, pretty much, is, we're just taught to kind of to think one way and to conform to the basic ways of this society, and we're not taught that there's any other ways of thinking, and any other ways that do exist, we're taught to fear them. So most people, when they hear of anarchy, they can only think of chaos and burning buildings or something like that, when obviously it's so much more than that. And so that's my answer. This is indoctrination, basically.
So just building off what Kimberly was talking about social relationships, the state and capital and the other forces that try to structure our lives interrupt and try to mediate all of our social relations. We don't have to govern ourselves. We don't have to de-escalate. We don't have to engage in different kinds of justices with the people around us, because the state and other forces try to seize that and take that from us. On top of that, all of these structures also place a heavy toll on our bodies. Like, work exhausts us. We're constantly stressed and worn down, and that limits a lot of the time and energy that we have to dedicate to organizing. And whenever there is a rupture and people rise up, these structures mobilize people who benefit from them to defend them. And so some of the important work of nurturing the development of mutual aid infrastructure and building solidarity between emancipatory projects, it's not glamorous work. It's really energy intensive. It's not immediately gratifying, but it's the work that needs to be done to kind of create the base in order to support these other projects. Like, there are a lot of very important movements that emerge in response to things happening locally, regionally, internationally, and they are valuable projects. They help train people and learn the skills of organizing, but oftentimes they just can't sustain or support themselves without that underlying mutual aid infrastructure. And as for the second part of the question, with states accepting anti-capitalism or anti-imperialism, states as they are just inherently imperialistic, and so often they just move based on their regional interests. So a state may take a so-called anti-imperialist stance abroad about an international issue, but then engage in imperialism in their own backyard, or decide to be silent about the imperialism of another state because it supports their economic or strategic political interests. They're not, the only consistency is their own interests there. So I don't think that a state could be anti-imperialist. They'd have to become something. We have to organize ourselves in a different kind of polity in order for that to happen.
One of the challenges I see with predominantly immigrant and other diaspora communities is the model minority complex and other pressures of assimilation into what it means to have a Canadian identity, which often entails just being a tool for nationalism and capitalism, right? This ties in, I've noticed, with the failure to recognize that the myth of Canada's celebration of multiculturalism, the so-called tolerant, friendly Canadian, is actually historically rooted in political campaigns to drown out calls for anti-racism. So instead of putting in institutional effort into fixing problems affecting minority groups, the Canadian state just slapped a Band-Aid on it and declared it solved. And so this critical history and the efforts that went into things like decolonization that continues today is sometimes forgotten or hidden.
Thank you, Joanna. I want to reflect on what Will was talking about, and that was burnout, fatigue, and all those things that capitalism, the strain that it puts on its population just to survive, really causes movement to, or potential movement to not have the energy to put in the work necessary to overthrow the colonial and capitalist forces. I remember Cleopatra was saying in an interview that she felt like adults, they reached a certain age, especially yeah, adults, and they reached a certain age, the middle age, and particularly in Black America, as he was referring to, and he was saying that adults get so tired. There is almost no joy in their faces anymore, no fire. And so for me, that really reflects the aspect of unwillingness or unableness to partake in resistance movement. And I also think that to build off of that, for me, as a member of the bourgeoisie, I think that privilege really played a factor in impeding contributing to radical movement. Because the way I was talking about it, Canada did a masterful job of convincing the bourgeoisie that life is just fine, that you let us centralize all of your services and you don't have to do the work. And we've got everything taken care of. And I think that in itself is, from my own world, the biggest block towards revolutionary privilege. And on top of it, white supremacy and colonization. So I think we just have to regain our youth, our fire, our idealism, and hope for the future.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And yeah, on that note, yeah, that's the next phase of discussion was about hope for the future. So I have a quote here from Kropotkin, 19th century Russian anarchist. He wrote once, "The hopeless don't revolt because revolution is an act of hope." So yeah, I wanted to ask you all, what are you the most hopeful about as you look around in 2024? Perhaps maybe where do you see anarchist perspectives and practices successfully in action here or elsewhere around the world? And Alan, I know you mentioned Rojava as a living example. Perhaps you can expand if whether that makes you hope or how it does, or anyone else taking it in a different or other examples.
Well, yeah, it does inspire me, because there you have people who are holding ground and expanding their federation, or at least defending it successfully, in a place that's gone through tremendous strife and suffering and upheaval because of the imposition of state structures. Going right back to the carving up of the Ottoman Empire into those various states at the hands of colonial forces. But apropos, like working with the idea that evolution and revolution are interrelated, and the notion of realizing anarchism in your everyday life, as Kim was alluding to, I see great hope in the community that I'm part of, first and foremost on that personal level, and projects like Camas, the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair, the Victoria Anarchist Reading Circle, and the ways in which over a kind of long haul period, I found myself as an anarchist engaged in various moments of resistance and some victories along the way too, and contributing through solidarity with others to their resilience. And I'm thinking most recently of the way in which we've been engaged with with indigenous sovereignty and working with other radicals in various indigenous movements who gain strength through our actions, and in turn we gain a deeper perspective on what anarchism entails through them. Because at least in the context of this entity called Canada, if there's anything that's going to unravel the Canadian state, it's the recognition of indigenous sovereignty and the pulling apart of the hierarchical structures of exploitation that the state upholds. And I also reflect, I mean, we had Mohammed Bamieh here recently speaking from a Palestinian perspective about anarchism, and the way in which he talked about how Palestinian resistance was really rooted in anarchistic ways of mutual aid and solidarity and so forth, effectively arguing, looking back to Kropotkin, that there's ways in which in our everyday lives and the societies that sustain us around the world, there are anarchistic ways of being that make those societies possible, and enacting social relations through a position of love, being part of that. And so I'm very much aware that the anarchist movement is global, and it's constantly diversifying and developing in response to different challenges and also opportunities. So there are many anarchist currents that hold great promise for positive change in Syria and elsewhere.
Whenever I see people organize autonomously, in spite of the state, I'm hopeful for the future because it illustrates our capacity to self-govern. There are many small local initiatives to provide community mutual aid in the face of things like colonialism. I think the Wet'suwet'en protests in early 2020 really showed that, where Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in a decentralized way got together to support blockades and ceremony and protest and engage in direct action, a real diversity of tactics for 3 months. Also projects against precarity, like community food support and Food Not Bombs, and providing people reliable meals where other organizations and institutions have failed. Those getting together to confront extreme weather events in their communities, whether it's flooding, rivers filling up sandbags, or getting together to fight fires when the provincial or federal emergency services refuse to assist. And also helping refugees and immigrants, like people who are at the border, making sure people crossing at dangerous points have water and services and support, supporting people who are fleeing from genocide, civil conflict, or invasions from their own countries. A lot of that here in Canada requires private individuals and organizations in order to support people. So to bring them over, and that's just work that needs to be done, that people are taking up. And what's really inspiring and hopeful about this is, while the state and capital and all these other forces are vast, these projects and ruptures show that they're not all encompassing or all consuming. There's they don't have as much of a stranglehold on us as sometimes we might think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. What gives me hope for the future is places like Bojava, which Alan pointed out, they continue to grow and progress and implement their own structures in society. What gives me hope is the Tapatita in southern Mexico and their ongoing resistance. What gives me hope is my indigenous friends and community members who defied colonization each and every day just by waking up in the morning and refusing to quit and refusing to back down and to be proud to be Indigenous each and every day, even if we're not anarchist in nature necessarily. What gives me hope is that the number of Jews like myself who have turned against one of the most atrocious colonial projects, arguably in the history of the last 150 years, in what's going on in Gaza and occupied Palestine. That really gives me hope as a Jewish anarchist that the Israeli state is losing more and more support each and every day. My only hope is that we don't settle for a recreation of another state, that we see that colonization and authoritarian forces, racist forces, continue to reinforce these oppressive systems. But the overall deflection of support for Israel really encourages me. And last but not least, Camas and Victoria and Arctic put how we have grown and continue to progress and grow and add new things each and every day gives me a lot of hope, though including this podcast. So I'm really excited about what the future holds, not only internationally, but locally here on the Swanman territories as well.
Hey, thank you, Nate. Yeah, I think it's a great, there's a lot of inspiring, powerful things happening right now. And Soraya, yeah. What gives you hope these days?
I'm hopeful for internationalist mutual solidarity between communities fighting for their self-determination and liberation, whether it's from Syria to Ukraine to Palestine, Hong Kong, Congo, First Nations, and so forth. As the saying goes, no one is free until we're all free. So I'm also hopeful for the anarchist movements that I've been seeing growing in places like Iran and Afghanistan. They're up against some very powerful tyrants, backed by even bigger tyrants. And despite all the hurdles they're faced with, from their comrades being jailed, being executed, they keep fighting. So I'm rooting for them and really for everyone facing the same struggles.
Yeah, thank you, Soraya. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Is there any last thoughts or reflections that have kind of been sparked or brought up by the questions, or maybe didn't get covered? Okay, great. So thank you, everyone, for your thoughts and perspectives. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast. We will be continuing this with further episodes, so stay tuned, and thanks once again for listening.